Laura did not plan to come home early that day, but the meeting at the clinic ended faster than expected, and the gray sky outside made her feel uneasy, like something unfinished was waiting for her. As she parked the car in the driveway of the quiet suburban house in Ohio, she noticed Mark's car was gone, which meant he was still at work, but the living room light was on, glowing softly through the curtains. That detail alone made her pause, because the house was usually empty at this hour. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, and the silence felt heavier than usual, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioner. She set her bag down slowly, listening. Then she heard a sound, soft, almost like a sharp breath being held too long. Laura followed it toward the living room, her heart beating faster for reasons she could not explain. When she turned the corner, she stopped short. Ethan was there, sitting on the edge of the couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, staring down at his phone as if it were delivering bad news again and again. He looked older than his 23 years in that moment. His jaw was tight, his shoulders stiff, and his usual calm expression was gone. Laura had known Ethan for nearly 5 years now, ever since she married his father, and she had never seen him like this. He was usually polite, steady, careful with his words, always trying to make things easy for everyone. Seeing him tense and alone like this made her chest tighten. She considered stepping back quietly, pretending she had not seen him, but something in his posture stopped her. It was the kind of posture people have when they are carrying a truth too heavy to hold alone. She cleared her throat gently. "Ethan," she said, keeping her voice calm. He looked up sharply, eyes wide with surprise, as if he had been caught doing something wrong, though she could not imagine what. He stood up too fast, nearly dropping his phone, and forced a small smile that did not reach his eyes. "Hey, Laura. I didn't know you'd be home," he said. The words sounded practiced, rushed. Laura nodded slowly and stepped further into the room, noticing how quickly he slipped the phone into his pocket, as if hiding it. The air between them felt tight, uncomfortable in a way she had never felt before. She asked if everything was okay, and he said yes too quickly. She could tell he was lying, not in a cruel way, but in a protective one. Laura felt a strange mix of concern and fear, because when people lie like that, it usually means someone is about to get hurt. She sat down across from him, careful to keep distance, careful not to cross any line, because she had always respected the space between them. She had worked hard to be a stepmother who listened but did not control, who cared but did not replace. Ethan rubbed his hands together, a nervous habit she had seen only once before, at his mother's memorial service years ago. That memory flashed through her mind, and her stomach sank. "You don't have to tell me anything," Laura said softly. "But you don't have to sit with it alone either." The words seemed to crack something in him. He looked toward the hallway, toward Mark's office, as if expecting his father to walk out at any second, then back at Laura. His voice dropped. "I found something," he said. Just that sentence changed the air completely. Laura felt it before she understood it, like the first drop of rain before a storm. She asked what he meant, and he hesitated, clearly struggling between loyalty and honesty. In that moment, Laura realized how unfair the situation was for him, how often children, no matter their age, are pulled into problems they did not create. Ethan took a breath and said he had come home early the night before and seen his father's laptop open on the kitchen table. He had not meant to look, but an email notification popped up with a name he did not recognize. Curiosity had turned into confusion, then fear. Laura listened without interrupting, her face calm even as her heart began to pound. Ethan explained how the messages did not sound like work, how the tone was personal, how the dates went back months. He spoke quickly, like he wanted to get it over with before courage left him. Laura felt heat rise behind her eyes, but she did not cry. Not yet. She asked him why he was home now, alone, and he admitted he could not focus at work, could not stop thinking about it, and did not know who to talk to. That admission hurt more than the words themselves. Laura realized that in Ethan's mind, she was the one person he trusted enough to risk this moment with. That realization scared her, but it also grounded her. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just her husband's son, but a young man trying to do the right thing in a situation with no easy answers. Outside, thunder rolled softly in the distance, and Laura knew that whatever Ethan had found was only the beginning. The house no longer felt quiet. It felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Laura sat still after Ethan finished speaking, letting his words settle without rushing to fill the space, because she knew that once spoken, truths could not be taken back. The room felt smaller, as if the walls were slowly closing in, and the rain outside began tapping harder against the windows, matching the pressure in her chest. She asked Ethan to sit down again, and this time he did, dropping heavily onto the couch like his strength had run out. Laura chose her words carefully, not as a wife looking for proof, but as an adult trying to understand a story that was unfolding too fast. She asked what exactly he had seen, and Ethan explained in short, clear sentences, describing emails that sounded warm, private, and familiar in a way that had nothing to do with work. He said there were plans to meet, apologies for missing dinners, and small jokes that only people close to each other would share. Laura listened closely, her mind moving faster than her heart, connecting moments she had ignored before, Mark's late nights, his sudden need for privacy, the way he smiled at his phone and then locked it quickly when she entered the room. None of those moments had felt dangerous on their own, but together they formed a pattern she could no longer deny. She asked Ethan if he was sure, not because she doubted him, but because she needed to hear certainty from someone else to face it herself. Ethan nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor, and said he wished he were wrong. That honesty cut deep. Laura realized that this was not just about her marriage anymore, it was about a family being quietly pulled apart without warning. She thought about how carefully she had tried to build trust with Ethan over the years, never forcing affection, never asking him to call her anything other than her name, always respecting the memory of his mother. Now that trust was being tested in the hardest way. Ethan admitted that after seeing the messages, he barely slept, replaying every family dinner in his mind, wondering how long his father had been pretending. He said he felt guilty for knowing something Laura didn't, and ashamed for even reading those messages, even by accident. Laura reassured him that none of this was his fault, that responsibility belonged only to the person who chose to hide the truth. She could see relief flicker across his face, but it didn't last long. The weight of the secret still sat between them. Laura stood up and walked to the window, watching cars pass by slowly through the rain, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel the pain fully. Her chest tightened, her breath shortened, but she did not break down. Instead, she focused on staying clear, because panic would only make things worse. She thought about the life she and Mark had built, the routines, the quiet evenings, the plans they talked about but never rushed. She thought about how safe she had felt, and how that safety now seemed fragile. When she turned back to Ethan, her voice was steady. She asked him why he chose to tell her instead of confronting his father. Ethan hesitated, then said he did not trust himself to stay calm with Mark, and he did not want to become someone angry and bitter. He said he respected Laura, and he believed she deserved the truth more than anyone else. Those words carried a depth that surprised her. Laura realized that Ethan was not acting like a son caught in the middle, but like an adult making a difficult moral choice. The respect between them deepened in that moment, quiet and strong. She told him she appreciated his courage and that whatever happened next, she would not let him be blamed or pushed aside. She made it clear that this was her marriage to face, not his burden to carry. Ethan nodded, but worry still lingered in his eyes, because he knew things would change no matter what. Laura suggested they take a few minutes before Mark came home, to think clearly instead of reacting out of shock. She brewed coffee even though neither of them felt like drinking it, just to give their hands something to do, something normal in a moment that felt anything but. As they sat there, the rain slowly eased, but the tension did not. Laura's thoughts moved quickly, weighing options, preparing herself for denial, anger, or silence. She knew she could no longer pretend everything was fine. The mystery was no longer about whether Mark was hiding something, it was about how much truth she was ready to face, and what kind of woman she would choose to be once she did. Laura felt the weight of Ethan's words settle around them like a storm cloud, heavy and inevitable, but she forced herself to stay calm, knowing that panic or anger would only make the moment harder to navigate. She looked at him carefully, seeing the struggle in his eyes, the way he fidgeted with his hands as if trying to push the news away while knowing it could not be undone, and she realized that this moment, though painful, had created a bridge between them built on trust and honesty. "We need to be clear," she said softly, her voice steady but gentle, "this is not your fault. You are not responsible for what your father chose to do." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard, but his eyes still shone with worry, a mixture of fear for what might come and concern for her feelings, and Laura felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness for him, not as a stepson but as someone vulnerable in a moment too big to face alone. He admitted that he had tried to rationalize the messages at first, telling himself it could be a misunderstanding, a work mistake, anything that would make the hurt smaller, but the more he replayed them in his mind, the more he realized it was intentional, a betrayal that cut deeper than he wanted to admit. Laura listened, never interrupting, absorbing every word, and for the first time she noticed how much Ethan had grown into a thoughtful, empathetic man, someone who felt deeply and cared intensely, someone who could understand the nuances of human relationships in a way many adults could not. She reached out, placing a hand briefly on his arm, a small gesture of comfort, and he flinched slightly but did not pull away, letting the contact reassure him that he was not alone. "I can't imagine how heavy this must feel," she said, "to know something like this and not know who to tell or what to do next." Ethan admitted he had thought about confronting Mark, about asking him directly why he had kept secrets, but fear had stopped him. Fear of anger, fear of disappointment, fear of shaking the fragile balance of their family even further. Laura nodded, understanding completely. She told him that sometimes the right choice is not the easiest one, and sometimes silence is an act of love, but that did not mean they should carry it forever. They talked quietly, moving from the specific details of the emails to the larger emotions behind them, the hurt, the confusion, the feeling of being betrayed by someone they trusted most. Laura noticed tears forming in Ethan's eyes, the kind of tears that are born of fear and relief at the same time, and she felt her own throat tighten, a mix of sorrow and gratitude that he had trusted her with this moment. She reminded him that emotions were not weaknesses, and that feeling heartbreak did not make anyone less strong. It made them human, capable of empathy and understanding. Ethan's voice shook as he admitted that he had been carrying this alone for days, replaying conversations with Mark, imagining excuses, wondering if he had somehow caused the problem, and Laura quickly stopped him, insisting that blame had no place here except with the person who made the choice to hide the truth. They shared a quiet understanding, a bond that had never been so palpable before, a connection formed not through casual conversation but through the shared weight of reality, and in that moment, Laura realized that family was more than blood or routine, it was honesty, trust, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths together. The afternoon passed almost unnoticed as they talked, the rain outside softening into a gentle drizzle, and with each word, the tension in the room eased slightly, replaced by a careful, fragile calm. Laura suggested they focus on what they could control, how to act when Mark returned, how to approach the situation with dignity, how to keep their hearts steady while preparing for the conversation they could not avoid. Ethan nodded, feeling a small measure of relief in having someone else share the burden, and Laura felt an unexpected warmth knowing she could be that person, not as a replacement mother, not as a mediator, but as a trusted confidant. They moved naturally through the discussion, touching on the practical steps, what to say, what to observe, what emotions to manage, but always returning to the emotional core, the need for honesty, the need for clarity, the need for connection even in the face of betrayal. Laura encouraged him to stay grounded, to breathe, to remember that courage was not the absence of fear but the choice to act despite it, and Ethan took slow, deep breaths, visibly steadier than when he had arrived. He admitted that seeing her calm had helped him realize he could handle the truth, that the fear of confrontation was smaller when shared, and Laura smiled gently, feeling the first real sense of hope in hours. They planned to wait for Mark together, not in tension but in a quiet readiness, knowing the storm was coming but trusting that facing it side by side would make it bearable. As the sun began to dip behind thick clouds, casting soft shadows across the living room, Laura and Ethan shared a long, silent glance, a mutual acknowledgement that life would never be the same, that trust had been tested, but that bonds could survive, even strengthen, in moments of honesty and shared vulnerability. The emotional tension hung in the air like charged electricity, but unlike fear, it was a tension that promised growth, understanding, and the possibility of a future built on truth rather than illusions. Laura's mind raced as the moments passed, every second heavy with the knowledge that Mark would be home soon and that the truth they had unearthed could no longer remain hidden, yet she forced herself to stay composed, because panic or anger would only worsen the situation, and she needed clarity more than anything. She looked at Ethan, who was still tense but visibly calmer than when she had arrived, and she realized that his presence, his honesty, had prepared her in a way that nothing else could. He had shared the weight of the secret, making it possible for her to face what was coming without losing control. Laura spoke slowly, deliberately, explaining that she had noticed subtle signs for months: Mark's sudden late nights at the office, the way he kept his phone close and smiled at messages she could not read, the tiny changes in his behavior she had tried to ignore, but she had not allowed herself to accept the possibility until now. Hearing it confirmed from Ethan's perspective made it real. Ethan listened quietly, his hands folded nervously in his lap, and for a moment the only sound was the rain against the windows and their synchronized breathing, both aware that life as they knew it was about to shift dramatically. Laura reassured him again that none of this was his responsibility, that his courage in telling her had prevented him from being caught between lies and silence, and that he had acted with integrity, even if the truth was painful. They discussed what they should do next, carefully weighing their options, thinking about timing, words, and emotions, and Laura felt a strange calm settle over her, a clarity that came from confronting reality rather than avoiding it. Just as she was finishing, the front door opened, and Mark stepped inside, carrying his briefcase, unaware of the storm waiting for him, and the tension in the room shifted instantly, charged with anticipation. Laura stood slowly, placing herself between Ethan and Mark, her posture firm but calm, and she felt a mixture of fear, sorrow, and determination. Mark looked at both of them, sensing something was different immediately, the weight in their expressions impossible to miss. Ethan spoke first, his voice steady but careful, telling his father that he had seen messages, that he had understood something was going on, and that Laura already knew too. Mark froze, eyes widening slightly, and Laura watched the color drain from his face as the truth she had confirmed in her mind now hung in the room like a heavy curtain. There were no accusations shouted, no doors slammed, only the silent acknowledgement that a boundary had been crossed and that no one could undo what had been discovered. Laura's voice was calm, yet firm, as she told Mark that she had already prepared herself to hear the truth, that she needed honesty now more than anything, and that any lies would only make the inevitable harder to bear. Mark exhaled, the tension visible in the slump of his shoulders, and admitted, quietly, reluctantly, the truth that had been hidden, and Laura felt a pang of heartbreak mixed with relief that the moment of confrontation, though painful, was finally here. Ethan's presence made the admission less isolating, less volatile, because Laura had already created a shield of calm, protecting him from the brunt of anger and confusion. The three of them sat together, words unfolding carefully, emotions raw but contained, as Laura guided the conversation with a steady hand, ensuring that the focus remained on clarity, accountability, and the steps forward rather than recrimination. They discussed openly the consequences of choices, the feelings of betrayal, and the steps they needed to take as a family to rebuild trust or, if necessary, separate with dignity. Laura made it clear that she would not let bitterness dictate the outcome, that respect and calm communication would be their anchor, and Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of honesty in shaping their next decisions. The rain outside softened into a gentle drizzle, and Laura could feel the emotional weight lifting slightly, replaced with a careful, deliberate readiness to face what came next. In that room, the family dynamic shifted. No one was pretending anymore, and the truth had set a course that would change everything, but it also opened the door for healing, for clarity, and for a new understanding of loyalty, love, and respect. Laura looked at Ethan, then at Mark, and realized that courage had brought them to this moment, honesty had made confrontation possible, and now the choices they made together or apart would define their future, not the betrayal itself. The storm outside mirrored the storm within, but unlike the chaos of hidden truths, this storm had a direction, a purpose, and a promise that endings could also be beginnings.